This is Flick.
This is Rudy.
And this week we'll be going back to the year 1993 and discussing our favorite albums from 1993.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. We are going to find the creme de la creme of 1993. Whether it made the album charts or not, the only album charts you need for 1993 are our playlists. We're going to go over them next.
That's next on episode 36 of the Left of the Dial podcast.
All right, this one you may well know, you may not know it, and if you don't know it, I really don't know where you've been.
You forgot? Forgot the magnetism of Robin Zander or the charisma of Rick Nielsen?
That's kid stuff.
It's just come up to 5:35 a.m. Kommen Sie bitte und listen to Kraftwerk.
I don't know, man. I kind of like Van Halen.
Well, yeah, Plum, you do. And you know why you do? Because corporate America is shoving something down your throat and making you believe it because that's what they want you to believe. I mean...
Okay, buddy. I was just trying to cheer us up, so go ahead. Put on some old sad bastard music, see if I care.
That was Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell, a song in which Joni complains that they paved Paradise to put up a parking lot. A measure which actually would have alleviated traffic congestion on the outskirts of Paradise, something which Joni singularly fails to point out, perhaps because it doesn't quite fit in with her blinkered view of the world. Nevertheless, nice song.
How about the tunes? I want you to want me. The Dream Police. Da, 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 da. Your mama's alright. Your daddy's alright.
I get by because the people make a special effort to shop here. Mostly young men who spend all their time looking for deleted Smith singles and original, not re-released underline, Frank Zappa albums.
Gang. Yes. I mean, look, you can play an E pentatonic scale at 100 miles an hour till somebody's ears burn off. You can learn that, right? But finding the tangents within the framework, therein lies the artistry, man.
God made your ears. You didn't make them. You gonna argue with God's ears? If it sound good and it feel good, then it's musical. So play it like I say play it. From the top.
That was Sweating Lunatic Iggy Pop, part of our Tuesday night punk pack, which is climaxing at midnight with Madness. This is Norfolk Nights with Alan Partridge, and we're in the middle of Super Talk. Super Talk!
We are up to episode 36 of our humble podcast, and this week we're going into the Wayback Machine to talk about 1993 and our favorite albums from 1993. It's quite a contentious topic, and it's a good one. It is a good one this week. However, I don't think we can just jump right in and start talking music right off the bat. I think we probably need to take a minute. It is June 2nd of 2020. We should before getting in and talking about music, we should probably talk a little bit about what's going on in the world around us.
Yeah, we shouldn't talk about 1993 without first talking about today. What's going on right now? What started in Minneapolis a week ago with the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and really where we are now. I think today is day 8 since that happened, and it's I don't know, these things happen too often, of course, and this event happened in a place where I used to live, like within 2 miles of where I used to live, and a lot of protests and also a lot of rioting and everything has gone on in an area that I used to live, in an area I still consider my home in a lot of ways, and a place I still go back to and spend a lot of time in. And I think I always will. I think I'll always be very close to that area, and to have something so horrible happen, in a place that I love as much as I do. It's just it really it hits home, and it's tough.
It's hard to find a lot of silver lining for sure, because it's a lot of misery has to take place for a society to get to this point.
Yeah.
But it is important that, I would like to think we could use this to take the right fork in the road here and put some real work in. And, I don't want to get too negative or too political, but I do think we need to drop all this bullshit arguing about pretending that people don't know what the real problems are here. A great injustice has occurred. You can't expect people enduring that level of injustice for this long to also be calm and quiet and to channel their energy in the way that other people might think appropriate. We kind of got to get over all that bullshit here, and it's time to make some real progress instead of just talking about it.
Yeah, you have to realize and admit that it's systemic. It's it's a 400-year-old problem, and you have to recognize that, and you have to recognize the fact that as much as people would like to believe that that the worst of that is behind us, you have events like this that show you how and it's so common. It's such a common thing. We are just 2 or 3 weeks from seeing video of Ahmaud Arbery, and and you just realize how common this is, and I am, I do feel more hopeful. It has been a very rough week. It has been a week where I haven't really felt like, or it's been tough to think about much else. But where we are now, it does give me some hope. It does feel like a situation that could go in 2 very different directions over one more type of incident. So hopefully, like you said, hopefully we take the right road from here, and hopefully we have the patience to see it through. The stamina and the fortitude to do the right thing and make big changes, not just do something to sweep this under the rug or try to forget about it.
But for lots of people, that requires them to go to work on their own feelings. We all have family members. A family is going to have diversity of opinion. A neighborhood is going to have a diversity of opinion. We all have people in our lives who are clinging to some old bullshit, and all the pearl clutching and monocle dropping over these major stores being looted. Like I understand, nobody wants looting, nobody wants violence, nobody wants any of those things. But the idea that we must accept order or restore a type of order that is based on such significant injustices, like I think enough people see this stuff clearly now for us to really make some leaps forward. And I don't know that we have to have everybody's heart and mind to move forward here. I think they'll catch up. I don't know many people who want to live in a society that give them a ton of other choices on that one. You know what I mean? For me, we have a chance to move forward here. I think everybody has seen enough to know what's up, and I think we're all kind of tired of it. And this is a chance to make some real gains. So I'm going to try to stay hopeful. I'm going to try to see if there isn't some light at the end of the tunnel on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are signs, And the only thing I want to say about the looting is, yeah, nobody wants it. I don't think most of the protesters want anything to do with it. It makes their work that much harder. But don't let that be the story, because that shouldn't be the story, and I don't want to waste any more time on that. It's unfortunate, but you have to stay focused, and and it's not going to happen overnight for sure. It certainly has taken a long time to make any progress.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to be different. This isn't going to be the overnight change that everybody would love to have. But I just hope it leads to change that we need to have.
I think the pandemic, makes it more difficult in some respects. It does make it harder, especially if there is another wave of the virus, and then that can be politicized then too. But we're all living through this together. I think it's going to be hard for people to fall for that shit. I think we all know what's going on, pandemic or not. It is time to part ways completely with the worst of our impulses that this society has and has had, as you said, for hundreds of years. So, I feel like there's an opportunity in here, and we have more leverage now than we might at other times. We certainly have more leverage than we normally do, and if ever there was a time to start using that leverage, I feel that time is now. I think we could get some big stuff done, but I think we'll try to stay with this. I don't think we have to do this just once. I think this is going to this we should have many weeks where this is still relevant to talk about as needed.
Yeah. I don't have any sense that this is going to be leaving my mind anytime soon. And and it shouldn't leave the nation's mind anytime soon, or even the world. I mean, this is really something that has been taken up by much of the world. Because we're not the only one. We're not the only ones with such problems.
No, and there is. I think we have plenty to feast on in America in terms of the problems that we have to deal with, but there is no doubt that we want to do what we want to do as a part of a fairer and more decent world. You know what I mean? Like getting to a place where it is a fair and humane and decent world for everyone is got to be the aim, even if the first problem in front of us is national. And I would say this is definitely all American, what we're dealing with here, and I don't mean that in any sort of complimentary way.
Right. Yeah.
Now go ahead.
Oh well, yeah, and I was just going to go back to it is crazy that all of this is in the midst of a pandemic, because that's heavy enough on its own. Like that is one of the biggest things that we've faced in our lifetimes, and all of this, all of these things, the confluence of all of these events, it makes it I don't know, it's a very tough time to be alive, but you keep on living, and you keep on striving for a better life.
Yeah. And again, by comparison, I mean, there lots of people have it way harder than either you or I do, and again, this is another time where I think for any problems or any angst produced by the times, like it's there are many people on the front lines getting their skulls cracked today. You know what I mean? For just simply showing up and speaking their mind. So I am energized by that. Now I'm not sure about where you're at. I am back in the in northern New Jersey. I live just outside of Newark. I think I am under curfew tonight. I could look it up, but I think it might even be state of New Jersey is curfewed. You got any curfew action there in old Des Moines?
Yes. Yeah. I don't recall. I think it's 9. It's election night here. So it's the polls don't close until 9, I believe, and so the curfew might be 10. I'm not sure what the numbers are on that, but yeah. In addition to everything else, it is election night here as well. The Democratic primaries as well as, yeah.
Did Steve King lose?
What's that?
Did Steve King lose?
Well, I mean, they don't have that tabulated yet, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that could be that. If we were looking for something to get excited about during these times, if that SOB can go down, like I know we want to be positive, but that would be a positive for him to finally get what he's got coming.
And I don't live in his district, so it's not an immediate concern. But I think yeah, it's beyond Iowa that would like to see that happen. And it's certainly beyond his district, but that is a different district.
Yeah. Well, you and I are Eastern Iowa chauvinists, right? We have an anti-Western Iowa bias, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I currently live in Central Iowa, so I'm right in between the two. But yeah.
Well, both of us have a curfew, I believe, this evening. So while I'm going to let us off the hook to use some of our curfew time where we have to be indoors to talk about 1993. As long as we're using our waking hours to be more constructive, I'll let us have an hour for that one. I think we can afford that.
Okay.
So we don't really have a ton of rules this week, do we? Normally, if we're doing especially like a draft structure, we've got rules. This really isn't ranked, and this really doesn't have rules, but the 90s have been a pretty hot topic between you and I. And I have to say, I think that the year 1993, while everything on my list, I believe, is spectacular, I think 1993 was a crap year for music. I think picking
popular music, and I well, okay, so we'll have to debate the point, I guess, because
yes, we will,
because I'm plenty happy with everything on my list as well. I know you want to take a look at what the big hits were in 93, and
I do.
But to me, that isn't what's truly relevant.
For me, the year 1993 is the year that I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston was in it at its peak. It has to be the most played song ever, 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 ever. Although while I would say I am annoyed by that song, it's only because of the repetition. It is a beautifully written song, and it is a fantastic performance, but I cannot enjoy it. Nothing can be enjoyed when it is forced upon you that often. Nothing, literally nothing. And it wouldn't even need to be as much as that. It could just be as much as the year's other song of shame, which is Two Princes by the Spin Doctors, which while it came out in 91, it didn't chart till 1993. Now, you and I talked about this before. My body has a physical reflexive reaction. The second that drum riff starts on Two Princes, I turn the radio off reflexively. I don't even control it at this point. It's my lizard brain acting. That is one of the also most annoying, overplayed songs of all time. So you're trying to defend 1993 by saying, "Oh, it's only popular music that was bad." I would debate that point, but it was so bad that it basically fouled the entire pool. Period.
No, and this is why we're left of the dial. I think we're unencumbered by that being based on things that are the things that we love, not the things that maybe the world bought in high quantities and
wait.
What's that?
One of the biggest flops in the history of college radio, in my opinion. Now, admittedly, I was working in college radio in 92 and part of 93. That era produced the Judgment Night soundtrack, 1993. Now, that's a left of the dial album. That does not cross over really into popular culture. It was this mashup of like alt rock, I guess, like alternative rock, which at that point was very commercial, with hip hop. And if you look at the album, like you'd think it was the greatest album ever made. Teenage Fanclub with De La Soul. Where do I sign up? Slayer with Ice-T? Hell yeah, I'll take some of that. Like, almost everything on that album sucks, right? You'll admit that, right?
Most of it. I don't know that almost everything, but most of it. But yeah, I mean it was a okay.
A shitty year on college radio too.
So I'll say the same thing that I said about it when we were talking about it before the show. It's just sometimes ambitious ideas don't pan out, and really, this was a very ambitious undertaking. That just sometimes you have the right premise, but that doesn't mean you're going to have the right product.
No. 1993 is then is the year where the ambition went astray. I'll put it that way.
No, because you look at our list, or I'm going to say my list at the very least, and I think you have a lot of successes.
Yeah, if you can't find 15 good albums in a year, then you shouldn't be on a music podcast at all.
Well, I would say it was easier to find 15 good ones for this year than it was for 2017.
All right, well, now we're getting into the subjective stuff, which is fine. The last objective thing I want to put out there is that in spite of the fact that the Judgment Night soundtrack sucks, Helmet and House of Pain's Just Another Victim still slaps. It's still, that is A+ material. If you, I mean, I don't know if you haven't had that one on loud in the car, I question your commitment to the automobile and to music.
Well, I would say this is one of those things that you don't really know how much time went into the recording of these songs. My assumption would be that it has a lot to do with that you take this idea and then basically, how much studio time are you devoting to it, and how much time are these bands and hip hop artists, how much time are they really collaborating on this? I would say, if anything, it's more evidence of probably a lack of true collaboration.
That could very well be. And I don't know if that's what's wrong with the album or not. But Just Another Victim feels like two songs stuck together, but they just magically work. And then it feels like they each went into each other's half and just got it right. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man. Well, all right. I'll go out on the positive note once again. Helmet was really good. I saw them right around then when they opened up for Faith No More. I want to say something nice to Helmet before we get into this. House of Pain was a jam. With them on Just Another Victim, but their solo stuff too. Unsung, awesome. All right, here it ends. We can go to our list. Thanks for indulging me.
All right. Okay, well, who's starting this?
You can start, sir, as in deference to you.
Okay. All right, well, I have like a quasi ranking here, because I really, from 12 to 3, this is almost a tie. So I'm doing something close to a ranking, but I don't differentiate a whole lot from most of these. So anyway, I'm going to start with my number 15 here, and that was Where You Been by Dinosaur Jr. That was released in February of '93, and that was an album where I don't know how it sold, really. Looking back, I'd never kept track of this. Certainly it wasn't one of the top hits that you discussed earlier, but I think it was a pretty good album when Dinosaur Jr. Was, I do believe, just joining Sire. So it was a good major label debut, and an album that I still go back to quite a bit.
So I saw Lollapalooza in Des Moines that year, and they were there. I can't remember though if that's 92 or 93. They were great, and I'm I'm really happy. Dinosaur Jr. cachet. Like they were not like a huge band in their time, but I think like over time people are really starting to like they were ahead of their time in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of the kids are digging it too. And I think this was one of their great eras. Like their SST stuff is really, really good, but they did have this sweet spot around their major label catalog. Is nothing to be ashamed of. They didn't sell out. They made some great records when they were on Warner Brothers or Sire or whatever that was. It's a great record.
Yeah, I think Dinosaur Jr. stuff in general holds up really well. Yeah, I mean it. You know, like I'm very guitar centric, and so I mean it definitely scratches that itch for me. And yeah, I mean I don't know. To me, it sounds just as good today as it ever did.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right, number 15 for me. I'm going to go heavy on guitars. I don't know you to be a huge shoegaze guy. We don't talk a lot about it, but I think I mean you like the My Bloody Valentine stuff. You like the Ride stuff. That's you're down with that, right?
I do. Yeah, I'm a fan of that stuff. So we don't have any disagreements over it. I don't believe.
I would say 93 represents sort of the tail end of the classic era for shoegaze. So a lot of my of the albums on my honorable mention list are very shoegaze heavy, and I will save a lot of my shoegaze discussion for my my run through on my honorable mentions. But I did want to put Swerve Driver's Mezcal Head from 1993 as my number 15. I do prefer the album before it, Raise, from 1991. And I like it in part because I think Raise is a little more shoegazy. However, Mezcal Head to me is a like late shoegaze guitar masterpiece with some great singles. Great in the way that, I mean, it's certainly not commercial. I can't say a song called Last Train to Satansville is going to make a great single, but it kind of would have made a great single. So would Girl on a Motorbike and Never Lose That Feeling, Blowin' Cool, Forsaken Heat. Like the album is just, it came correct as far as, it was really sort of the last breath, I think, of the classic shoegaze era. It's like the last great statement. And in a lot of ways, it foretold that shoegaze would sort of get reabsorbed into the noisier end of things. Swerve Driver got back together a few years ago and had some reunion albums. They were great. I wish people spent more time going back and giving Swerve Driver a chance. So Mezcal Head is as good a place to start as anyway. It's certainly worthy of a number 15.
All right, my number 14 is Whatever by Aimee Mann. That's her solo debut, and it came out in May of 93. Super overlooked, I've always thought. I always, right off the bat, like I wasn't a huge Till Tuesday fan or anything, but from Aimee Mann's first solo record on, I've been a huge fan of hers, and a lot of great songs on this one, and I still feel like maybe people haven't gone. I think maybe people even that are Aimee Mann fans haven't gone back to this one when they picked up on her later on in her career. But this is where I really became a fan of hers. I thought Till Tuesday was fine, but this album I thought was great.
Yeah, I'm a big Aimee Mann fan as well. Can't fault the choice. My number 14 is going to be Potty Mouth from Bratmobile, and I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't understand how great they were at the time. I liked the cover of Cherry Bomb. It's pretty great. There's a ton of great stuff on the record, but I don't know. For some reason, it didn't hit me quite like it does now. It represents the best of the indie Northwest stuff, which I would say sort of separate from grunge. That whole scene, like I do think there's the twee end of it, which I like a lot, and I like K Records a lot. But then I don't like to use the word Riot Girl because I think it's kind of an oversimplification. But like that, the Northwest was cranking like incredibly good rock music from bands that were creatively female-led, female-driven, and the Northwest really had a great cluster of that. And I just feel like people don't remember how good the Brat Mobile record was. I would say that's another one of these bands we talk about all the time where they do great covers, so they are also great. Bratmobile does great covers too. So, and I want to throw in one last thing on there. The song "Love Thing," I've never read about it, but I've always interpreted it as a giant fuck you towards the Stone Temple Pilots "Sex Type Thing," which is one of the most offensive songs that I think has ever been put out. And I'm practically like a free speech maximalist, but like the cock rock rape fantasy stuff, I've always thought "Love Thing" was a proper reply back to that shitty fucking song. And I don't know if it was explicitly for that, but I was very, very happy in finding it later that yes, somebody around that time was not quiet about that. It's really shameful, I think, that that STP record got as far as it did. The Sex Type Thing, and I've always thought Bratmobile deserved more credit. I hope I got the timeline right there. If I didn't, I'm sure someone will let me know.
I don't think that could be right, but
I suppose I could just look it up myself.
Yeah, because let's see, Sex Type Thing was released in '92, so there was that. But when was it a hit? I guess would be the.
I remember because that album took a while to. That album took a while to become a phenomenon, but Sex Type Thing was the first single, and I knew about it because it came to the college radio station around that time.
Okay, so when was the Bratmobile album released? What month?
I don't know. I didn't look that up. I'm sorry. I don't keep track of the month, but
so,
I've always thought of "Love Thing" as being the fuck you back, like a reply record almost to Sex Type Thing, which I was hoping it was because I can't believe there weren't 10.
Yeah, okay, so it was a single released in January of '93.
Well, the timeline is at least plausible. Well, don't ruin it for me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I might be ruining it for you because Potty Mouth was recorded between August of '91 and July of '92.
All right. Well,
I'm sorry.
Wait, what? When did Sex Type Thing come out? When was it released as a single?
January of '93, and Bratmobile recorded between August '91 and July of '92.
All right, well, then I nominate "Love Thing" as should replace Sex Type Thing on all pressings of that fucking Stone Temple Pilots album. That's another reason the radio sucked around then. Fucking Stone Temple Pilots. But anyway, that's my number 14 is Bratmobile.
All right, my number 13. So I debated about this one because I don't like to do live albums for this type of list, because most of the songs are from other albums, and I would rather go with the albums that songs originate from than the live. But the Neil Young Unplugged has some of my favorite versions of his songs on it, and so I feel like there are a couple of Unplugs that are worthy of such a list, and you can probably guess what the other one is. But Neil Young Unplugged, which was released in June of '93, that's my number 13. I think it's a pretty great Neil Young acoustic performance with some top tier versions of his very well known songs by him.
Good choice. I probably overlooked that one. And it's, again, I'll go back and say most of the albums that were sold from Unplugged were trash. They were not good albums. You've picked from one of maybe half a dozen from that show that are remarkable or even important in their own artist catalog. So yes, in 1993, one of the very few great Unplugged albums came out. I have to grant you that.
Yeah, I might argue that there were that many ones that were trash, but I think there are only a handful that are truly exceptional. So we do agree on that, but I think there are only just a few that are I would say trash though.
Yeah, well, Springsteen and Dylan made two of them, so there's a hot take, and that's for another
Yeah,
time.
I'm not a big fan of either of those either.
Yeah,
I don't know that I'd say they're trash, but they're not
trash.
they're
There's
not that
trash.
great. They're
Common
not
trash.
they're certainly not great.
All right. I'll go quick on this one. I don't have a ton to say. I pick the Palace Brothers record. There is no one. What will take care of you? I'm not a big Bonnie Prince Billy fan. I find his catalog sort of impenetrable. Every once in a while, I will get one of his records that comes highly recommended, or I just see it often enough, and sometimes they are really good. So they really are, and sometimes they're not. So I know that he has like a cult following, and I think he deserves it. I don't know though that there's any better collection of songs that he is associated with than this album. He's written again. He's maybe like a songwriter, but um, I think I Was Drunk at the Pulpit belongs in like the great American songbook. And I also think Jolie Holland's cover of it is like exhibit 1A for why it belongs in the all-time great like American songbook. Now, it's a Drag City record. It's a slightly skewed take on the world. So stuff like I Tried to Stay Healthy for You, I guess you have to be a little alternative to get down with that stuff. But I like it. I like some of the weirder stuff. And frankly, I like the weirder stuff more. So I know Bonnie Prince Billy's great. I can't think of anything I've ever seen from him or heard from him that is better than this record. And I think the highlights on this record are like among the great stuff ever. So I'm giving it the lucky number 13 spot.
All right. My number, excuse me, my number 12 is Star by Belly. That was released January 25th of 93. I don't know how tastes go. I think this album also holds up really well. I think this maybe could be bigger today than it was in its time. But then again, guitars aren't exactly the in thing right now. But the songs here, I never not loved the songs on this album. And the sound I think is great. I love Tanya Donnelly's voice. Think she's a pretty good songwriter, and that's my number 12.
Yeah, Feed the Tree was great. That was big. Was a big.
Geppetto's also great. Slow Dog's also great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff here, and to me it sounds of its time, but also holds up as well. It definitely makes me think of that time when I listen to it, but it doesn't sound dated to me at the same time.
Right. I love Throwing Muses stuff. I love the 4AD stuff. I thought Belly was great. I love Tanya Donnelly. I love the Breeders, the first Breeders record. She's on Safari too, right? Tanya Donnelly?
I don't know if she was still there at that time. I will find out. But she never had a big role in either of those bands, either Throwing Muses or Breeders. And Star was like her coming out really, where she got the chance to, come to the front, and I think she came through pretty well.
Yeah. Her cover of Shoplifters of the World by the Smiths on the Smiths tribute album from like 10 years ago is fucking great. So, yay, good call.
All right, so hold on a second, because she was still in the Breeders at the time of Safari. Yes.
Safari is the most underrated Breeders release, and then therefore I'm going to say Tanya Donnelly is the most underrated Breeder.
Well, she didn't have any songwriting credits on it, but she was part of it.
Well, there was covers on it. It's only a 4-song EP.
There's only one cover on Safari, and that's So Sad About Us by The Who.
It's a great cover, right? That's great.
It is an excellent cover, yeah, excellent
Hell
cover,
yeah.
excellent song, but the rest are originals.
Yeah, and they made an awesome video for Safari. All right, we're gonna do a Pixies family tree show. That cinches it because it gives us an excuse to talk about the Breeders, Throwing Muses, Belly, all of it. That's an awesome playlist in the making. Good call.
That's a playlist I already made for myself, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm on it. All right, for me, number 12, I'm going with Kate Bush, The Red Shoes, and I know all of you at home are like, but that's not even one of her greatest albums. It's actually a pretty good album, and Kate, like the dead spots in Kate Bush's catalog are like the crowning achievements of 99.9% of people who ever go into a recording studio. Like Kate Bush on a bad day is still better than almost anybody who has ever taken up either the songwriting or song performing craft. So anybody who wants to snark about whether or not it's as good as some of her other records, that's fine. It has Rubber Band Girl, which was a great single. It has some great deep cuts, and then perhaps most importantly, although largely uncredited if I'm not mistaken, is her song with Prince, Why Should I Love You, which is a fun Prince record, and it's in her hands. It's a really great record. So I'm giving Kate Bush a big bump up in part. I'll admit it may not be the equal of The Sensual World or Hounds of Love, but it's still a pretty great album. By that point, she sort of got on with a normal life, and it has Prince on it. So it's still better than almost anything that's ever come out in the history of the world.
Okay, I need a moment now because I just realized I don't have an 8, number 8 on my list. So, okay, so anyway, I'm moving things up and going for the album that I would have had as my 16. So my number 11, which was my number 16 until a moment ago, is 13 by Teenage Fanclub, released in October of '93. And interestingly, this is where the bulk of my 1993 is, in October, and like late September and into November for me is where a lot of my list came from. So Teenage Fanclub released 13 in October 4th of '93. I thought an excellent follow-up to Bandwagon-esque, that was one of those albums that Geffen really kind of dropped the ball on, had a really good album that they didn't promote very well, which is a shame because it's very good. And I think to this day, probably a lot of people don't realize how good it was, but go check that one out because a lot of great songs here. And Teenage Fanclub, if you like power pop, you can't not like Teenage Fanclub, I do believe.
Yeah. Where do you feel that? I mean, I know this must grate on you because you are a fan. I am also a fan, but should we use this as an occasion to discuss about how Bandwagon-esque rates? Because I think you do have to think about Bandwagon-esque at the same time, thinking about what they're 1993. They both years. When their great album comes out, Nirvana's great album comes out, their next album comes out, it's also fantastic. You know what I mean? But it has to live in the shadow of Nirvana, and it has to live in the shadow of Bandwagon-esque. It's that I feel like that album has not necessarily kept up with Bandwagon-esque in their lore. Would you put it above it?
I do put it above it. I think the concept is maybe a better song than any song on 13, but as an album, I think 13 is a better album. So the thing about Nirvana coming in, and I think this is what leads to all of these great bands with great follow-up records that didn't get promoted, is that everybody was still looking, like once Nirvana got as big as they did, everybody was looking for exactly that. So that's why your Stone Temple Pilots come along, and they're the type of bands that get promoted because, they're grungier, And that's what the record labels were all looking for at that point. They were looking for more for a Stone Temple Pilots than they were looking for a Teenage Fanclub. Well, that's why we're discussing what we're discussing now. I think is because this is what we love that maybe not everybody is up on, but 13's a great album that you might have missed out on, and if you did, now's as good a time as any to get acquainted with it.
Yep, I think Teenage Fanclub also created a lot of big star fans right around that era in particular. I think that the ascent of Bandwagon-esque helped create gave lots of people a way into the big star catalog, I think.
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest one I think is when the Replacements did Alex Chilton.
Sure.
But I guess it was around the same time that the Big Star albums got released on CDs. And so, of course, when the Replacements did Alex Chilton, not everybody had access to that music. But yeah, I mean, Teenage Fanclub was more along in the timeline where the Big Star stuff got put out on CD. And so that was, of course, that was an essential thing. But yeah, I mean, and it also doesn't help that Teenage Fanclub is a band from Scotland, so I don't imagine that they toured the U.S. as extensively as maybe they would have if they were based here,
right?
Naturally, but and that doesn't help things really.
Well, having Spin Magazine rate Bandwagon-esque as the album of the year and not Nevermind put pressure on Teenage Fanclub that they didn't deserve. And I think everybody wanted to sort of correct that. Like, I love Bandwagon-esque, but you can't put it above Nevermind. You can't.
Yeah.
So I think people overdid it a little bit on trying to correct that.
But, in all, I would have to say Teenage Fanclub's a huge success because they are together to this day.
Yep.
They still make records. They still tour. They are, a success. They're for a band to not have huge hits, where you're playing state fairs every year but still be together with a different kind of following. I think that's successful.
Well, they'd have now you get a Broadway musical instead of the county fair circuit. All right. Well, yeah, you can't. I think you can describe that as the prime. That era is like the prime of Teenage Fanclub. Although, if you ever meet one of them, Mr. Flick, please tell them they need to put that "The World Will Be Okay" on Spotify. It's not on the streaming sites, and it's my favorite song by them.
Well, and I mean, it may be the prime, kind of, but don't sleep on their merge output. I mean, once they came onto the merge label, they've had a lot of great stuff. So check it all out. The Teenage Fanclub, never not good. That's my assessment. Never not good.
Never not good. All right, up next for me, we're going to go with, I think we're at number 11 for me, so we're approaching our top 10. Yes, this is 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. Is the debut album by Suede, which is an important album in the life of a British indie rock fan. Because I was a big Smiths fan, and I when the Smiths broke up, I definitely stuck with all of them or tried to follow them around wherever I could. Some of them stuck with Morrissey for a bit, and Johnny Marr did some stuff we'll talk about a little bit later. But Mike Joyce played with Suede, and eventually Morrissey himself, I think, tried to get Bernard Butler from Suede to be his, like, the new Johnny Marr for him. And he said no. And Suede, I think, is overlooked in America, and it's unfair. They were maybe not consistently great, but their first two records, the first two for sure, and then the singles on almost every other record, and some of the B-sides are great too. But man, that Metal Mickey and the Drowners, damn, those are good. Those are really, really, really good. They sound good now. And I'm just it's a fun album to go back to. I'm gonna have to talk about them again, so I'm gonna cut it off here because I got to talk about the fall in a little bit. But I think the Suede debut album definitely rates. It's maybe not top 10 for the year, but it's close. So a number 11.
It's pretty close to my 15. It's 16 or 17, I would say. I really like the singles and like the Bernard Butler albums that that Suede had, the first two albums that he was on, which the other one was Dogman Star. But yeah, I in all, like what I think, the singles off of this album are good, really good. As an album, like I think there are some dead spots on this album that are the reason why it falls short for me. But it is very good, and the singles are great on this album. So very close to my list. Okay, so my number 10 is "Frosting on the Beater" by the Posies. That came out April '93. Also an album I think that was under promoted. "Dream All Day" was a song that got a lot of play on alternative radio. Not much else did, but I think there's other stuff here that's really good. And I really liked, so coming off of Dear 23, very just straight up pop and a great album, great songs. Dear 20 or "Frosting on the Beater" very, had that harder edge. I don't know, if there was any intention to fall in with the grunge audience on this one. To me, it doesn't exactly sound like what they're going for, because they are still very catchy and melodic songs, but louder for sure. And I think it works really well. So I don't know. I think this album could have been pretty huge in the right hands, but
it's the David Geffen curse of that era. All the alternative acts that were signed to DGC around that time, other than Nirvana, which was like a licensing deal for Sub Pop. I don't know, but think of all the bands they ruined around that era. Holy crap!
Yeah, I think they were just trying to squeeze out another Nirvana or something, that just kind of ruined it for everybody else involved, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I remember Sonic Youth, I think, was sort of the Pied Piper there. Once Sonic Youth got a decent contract, then I think they started bringing other people over. And then I remember they ground up, we've talked obviously about some of it, but XTC is another band that never was able to recover from having to do business with DGC. All right. Yeah. Well, look, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before with Sloan as well. Sloan was part of that.
Teenage Fanclub, Sloan. I mean,
Sloan, Teenage Fanclub, Posies. Yep, a lot of great stuff that was on that label that they had it, but didn't use it. Didn't know what to do with it.
Someday we're gonna do a DGC of the early '90s special.
Yeah. The gold that DGC trashed.
That's a show.
Mm-hmm. That's a show. Yeah, it probably is.
All right, we're cracking the top 10. Worthy top 10 for you. If I had to name of all the bands that could get back together, could still get back together, but never have, that I really, really wish would. I'm not. It changes a little bit, but Cocteau Twins would be way, way up there for me. Their album from 1993, Four Calendar Cafe, is the second to last album they ever made, and I loved their early stuff, their 4AD stuff, the little more ponderous stuff. But again, they never made the same record twice. They always added or subtracted something tastefully. And so they had this very long, very productive career. And I think normally you might expect a band like them to sort of peter out at the end and just exhaust their ideas. And they absolutely did not do that. I think each of these albums, the Capitol Records era in particular, or everything after 4AD and Relativity in the US, those albums they're still really trying to find new ways to do the things they were great at. And I think they succeed on 4 Calendar Cafe in a big way. What I would call side A, I think, is almost perfect. Liz Fraser is really underrated as a vocalist, and I think Robin Guthrie is very, very underrated as a guitarist. I think there have been empires built by mining the stuff he did. Like the guitar sounds he created for that band ended up building bands build whole careers on it. He's just really slept on, and this album is sort of slept on. And even the first cut, know who you are at every age. There is nothing else in their catalog that sounds like that, and they're already kind of masters of it. So give it a try. By the end there, I think they were not getting along, Robin Guthrie and Liz Fraser, but I don't know. The music's still great. 4 Calendar Cafe from '93 from Cocteau Twins. That's a top 10 album, son.
Okay. All right. So my number 9, and again, basically when it, I would say from 14 or 15 up to 3. These are essentially ties, so don't get too caught up in the ranking here. But yeah, I mean, we're getting in the top 10 technically, but I have a lot of top 10s here. Just I happen to have 15 top 10s is all. Okay, so my number 9, Kerosene Hat by Cracker, released in August of '93. So I guess really it's kind of this is where it kicks off, where most of my favorite stuff from the year was released the rest of the year from late August on. I love the first Cracker album. I love David Lowery in general, and like he's somebody that he still puts out albums with Cracker, still puts out albums with Camper Van Beethoven, and I love all of it. I still I still am interested in stuff that he puts out now. It's on much lower. It's much lower profile now, of course. Low is the big hit off of this one, and Low is the song that most people know by Cracker, and for most people, it is the only song that most people know by Cracker. But this is a thoroughly great album. Even if you get, even if you go beyond Low, of course, and maybe Euro Trash Girl, maybe Get Off This. Even when you get past those songs, you still have plenty more great stuff off of this album. It's very end to end.
Yeah, I'm going to put David Lowery as also one of our masters of covers, whether it's Cracker or Camper Van Beethoven. They do incredible covers.
But great originals along with those covers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a huge fan of David Lowery, and Johnny Hickman is also a great guitarist. I think they're a good tandem. Love Cracker, and all of there have been many incarnations, many different rhythm sections to Cracker, but Cracker essentially is David Lowery and Johnny Hickman. It's essentially that duo. Yeah, I think they're fantastic together. They started Cracker during the Camper Van Beethoven days. They were friends because they both loved country music, but also loved punk. So they're just struck up. Kindred spirits basically is what they were, and I think they're a great tandem, and glad that they're still doing it.
Yeah, I love their country covers album. Euro Trash Girl was a hit, and I thought This Is Cracker Soul.
Alternate hit.
Yeah, alternate hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
This Is Cracker Soul and Happy Birthday were kind of alternate hits.
Yeah, off the debut.
Yeah, that album he did with Leftover Salmon is fucking great too. Although I'm very angry because those last great 2 Camper Van Beethoven albums of the '80s are not on Spotify. Key Lime Pies and Beloved Revolutionary Sweetheart are not streaming fully, and it sucks because those are prime material too, especially with those first 2 Cracker albums.
There are a lot of Cracker albums that aren't streaming fully on Spotify as well. So I think that's a David Lowery thing. He's
it's douchey. He's douchey, but you're right. They're great.
Yeah, I think he has his reasons. I'm not going to attack him on it. I think he probably has reasons. He's very protective of his stuff, and I think he probably has his reasons. I mean, we do have to understand that the royalty program that Spotify has is not the most generous. Mm-hmm. So we do have to recognize that fact, and not. I don't think we should be biased towards Spotify. We'd all love to have it. We'd all love to have everything on Spotify, but it is it isn't the most fair to artists though either. So.
All right, I'll take that under advisement. I do think the machinations of the music industry are, in general, nightmarish. It's one of the again. It's a topic maybe for another day or a parking lot or whatever. But I mean, almost all record contracts and record labels. I love certain record labels, but I mean that aesthetically. They're almost all parasitic and terrible in some way or another, don't you think?
Right. Yeah, but it's it might be better than some, but that doesn't mean that it's fair though either. It doesn't make it fair. I mean, yeah, that it's we could go on, and sometimes.
Oh, you're right. I'll let it go. All right. But yes, we won't focus on the negative. You're right. It's his art. He has his reasons, but I really enjoy those albums. I own copies of them already. I have already paid for copies of them. It's just the format switching and being able to take them all with me everywhere I go would bring joy to my life. That's all. Going deeper into the top 10. I was complaining about normie music a little bit, which is ironic given who I am. But the stuff on the radio was really bad for most of the year, but there was a couple of records that were really popular. A lot of them were kind of rap records or stuff even like Whoop There It Is, which is like a novelty record. Even that, could break up the monotony of all the other horrible music. One of the artists who broke up the monotony for me really well that year, and an album I still enjoy very much, and I know that maybe she is not cool, but I think Sheryl Crow is pretty great. And I think her first 3 or 4 albums in particular are fantastic. I think of her almost being sort of like the female Tom Petty level. For me, I know that's maybe a little bit of an overstatement, but she's pretty damn good. And I think people underestimate what a great songwriter she was. And Tuesday Night Music Club has the song All I Want to Do on it, and so it's sort of distilled down to that. I actually don't feel at all ashamed. I enjoy that song. It's a great little song in its own way. It's an interesting sounding record. But the first half of that record, side A, I think is it's certainly got to be in discussion for the best side A of the year, 1993. Run Baby Run, Leaving Las Vegas, Strong Enough, Can't Cry Anymore, and I can't remember where it cuts off. I don't think Nana's song is on that side, but whether it is or isn't, pretty great record. I enjoy that record, and I still listen to it, and I like the record after it a ton too, and I like Sheryl Crow. And if you don't like Sheryl Crow, then you just don't like rock music, then I think.
Well, I do like Sheryl Crow. Not she does have her misses, and I don't really love this album. I love the 2 that came after this. The next one was her self-titled album.
Mm-hmm. That's a great album.
That's a great album, and Globe Sessions is also great.
Yep.
Very, very on board for those. Less on board for this because I love Can't Cry Anymore. There isn't much else on this, that if I'm making a Sheryl Crow compilation or something, I'm going to leave most of this. I'm even going to leave All I Want to Do. As it turns out, I think two of her biggest hits are two of the songs that I hate the most by her, and I always felt like All I Want to Do was kind of annoying, and then Soak Up the Sun is definitely my least favorite thing that she ever did. And they're the two songs, where she talks about having fun, and it and naturally, because they're songs about having fun and soaking up the sun, they're huge hits. But just songs that I was always kind of annoyed with. Do love Can't Cry Anymore, and
Yeah.
and the thing is, I like that song so much that I bought this album because of that, even knowing that the other stuff on it I didn't like very much. But I do like that song quite a bit.
She, to me, is she was unpretentious, and I think she was just a person, put warts and all. I think just very relatable. And then she could write and play,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's why the next two albums I love, and I think they're great. And I don't know, I don't really know who the Sheryl Crow audience, what it's made up of, but my hopes would be that the Sheryl Crow audience is based on fans of the second and third album by her, because I think those are really great, probably underrated because my assumption is that because those weren't the hit laden ones, that her fan base really aren't the people that love those albums, but that's that's what it should be.
Well, when this pandemic is over, like, I love really intense shows where you're like in a theater and it's super dramatic and all that other stuff. And actually, most concerts I love are like that. I did not, when I had my freedom, I did not do enough, like, put a blanket out, get a lawn ticket, and just, I don't know, have just get a little bit high or maybe a little bit buzzed and just sit there and enjoy a fucking Sheryl Crow concert. Damn it, that is exactly what I want to do when this pandemic is over. I just want to just sit there a little buzzed out in the sun on the lawn and go to a damn Sheryl Crow concert. Who's hurt by that? Nobody.
Yeah. My concern would be that she's not going to do, like, her set list isn't going to be heavy with the songs I want to hear.
She's cool though. She knows she's a music fan too. She knows what it's like to show up for one of those shows and then someone harshes your mellow. She wouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, and that really shows on the albums that I love by her. But unfortunately, those aren't the really popular ones.
Well, look, the Tuesday Night Music Club was marketed as a little bit alternative for a bit, and then she had those monster hits. But Leaving Las Vegas is a really well-written and interesting song. It's just got overplayed.
Yeah, Leaving Las Vegas was like kind of a somewhat more mainstream alternative radio hit, and then All I Want to Do was just a mega hit, and then Strong Enough was certainly a mega hit as well.
That's a great little song. Anyway, but your point's well taken. I think we both agree, certainly on the second and third record being big, important records. So
definitely her artistic peak was
She could write. I'm surprised more people don't cover her because that stuff is really well written. But anyway, carry on, sir.
Okay, my number 9, Lethal Injection by Ice Cube, was released almost at the end of '93. Ice Cube to me was maybe the MVP. I think definitely the MVP of NWA, and it showed once he had his solo career. It just continued. He continued to spit the fire and and he was in Fuego, and not much of not much dead space on this album. I think it's thoroughly really good, great beats, great music, and then because it's Ice Cube, the lyrics are always on point.
Yeah, it was a very, very big year for rap. I mean, that's a tough one because that's on my honorable mentions list. We have some strong disagreement about the year in rap in 1993, so I'm just going to put some respect on your choice. You're right; it is primarily killer, very, very little filler. That certainly, I think, was close to his prime, right?
Well, I think his prime. I think Straight Outta Compton going into America's Most Wanted. To me, that's the prime. He was still. I think he was still very much hot, very much at full capacity, full speed, and everything. He was still rolling.
It's got some big, big hits of his. Like that's really prime, just mega champion growth in the Ice Cube catalog. All right, up next for me, I have to talk about Suede a little bit, but I'll try to steer clear of it as much as I can because I have picked for my next choice, which I think is my number 8, is the Infotainment Scan by The Fall, which I think people have either love or hate The Fall. I think there's a small group of people who are like super fanatics. I'm not a super fanatic, but I generally find stuff across the entire career of The Fall that I enjoy. I know there are a lot of people who love the early Rough Trade stuff, and then there's a lot of people who love the Brixie Smith era, and those are all great. I love Victoria and all that. All those New Big Prince is great. All that stuff's great. This record, people I think are starting to figure out is great. The Infotainment Scan. It does have quite a few covers on it, but again, I think Marquis Smith was a master with covers, and some of them the names have changed, and there's multiple versions of it, and they're songs that were obscure enough that they're covers, but it's really quintessential Fall. My personal favorite is there's a cover of Lee Perry's "Why Are People Grudgeful," which has also been recorded. It was like a diss record that went back and forth, and I can't remember because the other guy made actually the better diss record. Damn it, it's not on Spotify, so I can't put it on the playlist. That stuff drives me crazy. And we'll talk about that. Your point's well taken. I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but like how I think of music back then, you had to buy CDs and records only, and that's how I primarily did things. But it's just not how I primarily do it anymore, and not being able to grab that record bothers me. But it also has a cover of Lost in Music on it, which is great. And it has some fantastic originals, like It's a Curse, which maybe steals a little bit from New Year's Day by U2, but not enough. It's the last, I think, the absolute razor tongue on Marquis Smith, I don't think has ever been nastier than on the song Glam Racket, which he basically makes fun of Suede for 3 minutes for ripping off glam rock. Now, if you go read the interviews at the time, he denies that it's about Suede, but you can't have the word Suede in a song more than Glam Racket. It's about how it's called Glam Racket, and the word Suede is repeated in it like a dozen times. So whatever. It's great. That's the song I'll put on the playlist. So if you're a fan of The Fall and you didn't follow them this late in their career, that's a mistake. It's one of the last truly great end-to-end Fall albums. The covers on it are spectacular. The originals are on it, and it also does make fun of Suede.
Well, but Suede debuted in March of '93. So you think that they're going after Suede that soon after they debuted?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe it was because of the press Suede got. And the press about Suede representing some sort of glam revival, that was just hot air about Suede. So I think it's possible Marquis Smith eventually got cool with Homeboys and Suede, because Suede didn't invent like the NME. You know what I mean? Like all those papers. Again, I don't live in Britain. I've never lived in Britain. I don't think I could stand it. I don't think the way the British music press acts is it's like a parody of itself. And like Suede really got beat up because of that. Anyway, all is forgiven. It's still a great diss record. It's a great diss record. It's totally about Suede. Totally. It has to be.
Okay, my number 7 is probably an all-timer as far as debut albums goes. Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, which was released late 93, November of 93. Yeah, I mean it's probably the best Wu-Tang album, really, and it was out of the gate. I think at the time it was a little hard to wrap my head around, but definitely, definite classic here.
Yeah, rap is a really tough one for 1993. This is also on my list. It's my number 3, I think, for the year. I think I put it as that's my best rap record for the year, because it's not just that that album is so it's the fact that all the records that came out from the group around then also had such an incredibly high ratio of incredible like, that era, the output of that group during that era is really unmatched. And I admit, like, I favor the New York stuff probably during that era. You just can't beat it. You just can't. Like, that album is so good, and the stuff around it is so good.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it is that you have, Wu-Tang is so many rappers, and that's why that's why you can have such a great album, a great ensemble album, and then have so much great material spread out, is because it's coming from so many. But to have such a large ensemble, when they're all hitting the way that they're hitting at the time, it's kind of hard to top that.
Yeah, the Raekwon record around that. I mean, just there's it's such an incredible output in such a short amount of time. It's really remarkable. I don't know. I've tried getting my nephew to listen to all of that stuff, and I haven't been able to reach him with it. And I'm worried about the future, because if you can't reach him with that stuff, then what do we have? What's left? All right. Yes, we'll talk a little bit more about it later. Up next, we didn't really get too big on rules for this one, and I'm not sure how to count this one. There were 2 Red House Painters self-titled albums released in 1993, and there is significant overlap between them. I'm just going to lump them together and just say, whatever came out in 1993 under the name Red House Painters is my number 7 album. Mark Kozelek, I think, gets a bad reputation. Apparently, he's a difficult person to deal with. That may be his career. He's done a really wide variety of stuff. He's another person who was a master of the cover record. This first recording by him with as Red House Painters was it sounded really, it was on 4AD Records, and it was sort of immediately identifiable as a 4AD style thing. But damn, this output is just, I still think it's bracing. It still sounds really fresh. I'm in New Jersey right now, and so every time I drive in or out of the state, I have to utter the lyrics of New Jersey to myself for half an hour. It's compulsory. But Grace Cathedral Park, one of the most beautiful records, I think, of that decade. Fantastic. The cover of I'm a Rock is fantastic. There's just a ton of great stuff from 1993. I'm just going to combine it all and call it the self-titled Red House Painter debuts. I think are still just, they stand out in a career that stands out. Maybe he's tired of doing all that stuff. He certainly doesn't make records that sound like that anymore. He does more like the talking blues stuff. But wow, when he sang, he could sing beautifully, and there's like a real San Francisco vibe to it that I'm kind of homesick for. Anyway, Grace Cathedral Park in particular, but the Red House Painter stuff, you just can't go wrong. So that's my number 7.
Okay, my number 6 is Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville. Liz Phair's debut, and the trajectory of her career wasn't maybe what you would have hoped for, but definitely a really good debut. And I'm gonna say certainly a very hyped album when it came out, and I don't know that I would say that the hype was justified, but at the same time, it's definitely on my tops of the year, so I'm not arguing against it either. But it is a great album, and it's my six, but again, 15 to 3 is kind of a toss up.
Yeah, that's my number 2. I'll talk about it in a little bit. It's such a good album, and I'm glad it's in your top 10.
Yeah, it's in my top. It's in my top 10, but like at the time it came out, it was very, very hyped. The critics just glommed onto it because, like I think she sold it really well, with saying that it was an answer to Exile on Main Street, which I think was that fed the hype machine. I don't really know that I buy it, but anyway,
I don't hear it. All right, well, we'll talk about it in a little bit. We can just throw it open and chat because it's an important album for a lot of reasons too. Up next for me is the debut album from Grant Lee Buffalo, Fuzzy, which I think is also one of the last records on Slash Records that I remember. I'd love to do a show about Slash Records someday, but Slash Records' own Grant Lee Buffalo, Fuzzy, I think is an amazing album. I love how it sounds. It sounds old. It sounds new. It sounds acoustic. It sounds electric. It really does have it is like that was around that time. There's a lot of music that's sort of deliberately sort of dabbling across different genres of music. The Unplugged stuff was really big around then too, and it's got a little of that on it, but the songwriting is so good that the record still sounds really, I just think it sounds beautiful. And I think I would say, I got pretty big on Grant Lee Buffalo for a while there, and I bought the records of the band Grant Lee Phillips was in before, which was, I think, called Shiva Burlesque. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think Grant Lee Buffalo was heavily influenced by the singer in his previous band. But nobody knows who the guy from his original band was. They know Grant Lee Phillips because what he did with it is pretty amazing. His vocal performance on this album, I don't think he ever did better than this. He's always done great, but like this really has a wide range of the shit he can do. So if you like the alt stuff even a little bit, I think Fuzzy's great, and I think Grant Lee Buffalo were great. And you just can't go wrong on this one.
Yeah, Grant Lee Phillips is a fellow podcaster as well.
Is he? Oh, I'd listen to that.
Yeah, well, it goes back a few years, but he had a show that he was doing for a while, which was pretty good, and he would interview people I think were mostly his friends, but people that you'd want to hear interviewed, and that was pretty good, and I like this album too. It didn't make my list, but I like this album. Lone Star Song and Mockingbird. Definitely great, and I saw them open for Paul Westerberg that year when he was at First Avenue. So definitely a memorable night where they were the opener for Westerberg.
Awesome show.
Yeah, it was great, and that was actually the first time that I saw Paul Westerberg too. Okay, so my number 5, Come On Feel the Lemonheads by the Lemonheads, October 93. So again, this is in that period where the year really picked up. October 12th of 93, that was released. And I think It's a Shame About Ray is just flat out one of the best albums of the 90s period. And this is one of my favorite albums of 93. So Evan Dando was also really firing right around this period. Really, It's a Shame About Ray and this one, I think, are definitely at his artistic peak.
For sure. That's a good 1-2 punch. Does Juliana Hatfield play on Come On Feel the Lemonheads? Do you know, or
She probably did, but didn't. She wasn't like in the band, but she was probably. Well, she's definitely on it because there's a debut or a
'Cause
debut,
her,
a duet between them on one of the songs.
her album, the Juliana Hatfield 3 album, came out that year too, and that almost made my list. I wish more. We've talked about her a few times. I'm happy to talk about her every week. I think I feel like she really is underrated as a songwriter. And the Blake Babies were great too, but her solo stuff was really, really good, and a lot of it. I know she was hanging around Evan Dando and stuff. I thought she was eventually going to break through and be huge, but she should have, in my opinion. I'm sad she didn't. Anyway. All right, I'll go quick here. Next, I mentioned the Smiths earlier, the early '90s. I think people still were holding out hope that eventually the Smiths might get back together. But one of the things that made me pretty sure that they weren't was that Johnny Marr stayed around in the for a second album. I think Mind Bomb was like 1989. Well, I think it was one of the first things. Yeah, Mind Bomb is 1989, which is one of the first big projects Johnny Marr did after leaving the Smiths, and it was a total reversal of this of his sound with the Smiths. It was still recognizably him, but Matt Johnson's is definitely the creative driver of that band, and Johnny Marr was just in that band. And it really still had a very, very the heavy hand of Matt Johnson on it. I think Dusk is a little bit more of a band album, and it's a mean sounding record. It's a great, there are live shows taped from that era with they really were at their peak power live. They were great live, and this stuff sounds great live. It's a real rock album, and I'm not saying the didn't went out of their way to do anything other than rock, but they never really did straight up rock band arrangements quite like they did on this record. I think it's the last great the record. I think it's one of the best albums of the year. Dogs of Lust is fantastic. Helpline Operator, Slow Emotion, Replay, Love is Stronger Than Death. I think it had to be half this album was a single, was put out as a single, and deservedly so. So Dusk, I don't know. I feel like the is another one of these bands that were just fundamental and great in their time and are sort of being lost to history because they're not super. They were going to do a reunion tour before the pandemic, so I'm hoping people will get a chance to see the. I'm proud I got to see them when I was younger. They were super intense and awesome, and never more intense and never more awesome than on Dusk from 1993.
Okay, following up on the last album, Juliana Hatfield actually is only credited with backing vocals on "Come On, Feel the Lemonheads," and the song that I was thinking was a duet with Juliana Hatfield. Actually, it's Belinda Carlisle, which shows you how similar those voices are. I always, I guess I forgot that it was Belinda Carlisle, and just over the course of the years, that became Juliana Hatfield in my mind. So anyway, it's Belinda Carlisle, but Juliana Hatfield does some backing vocals on the album.
All right. Well, I will have to admit I'm a little partial to It's a Shame About Ray, but no complaints on the Come On Feel the Limit.
Yeah, no, It's a Shame About Ray, like I said, is one of the best albums of the decade period. Yeah. And okay, so my number 4 is the solo debut for Frank Black, self-titled debut by Frank Black, released in March of '93. I feel like most people, even Pixies fans, have slept on the Frank Black solo catalog. I think you should take the deep dive into that, and I think you'll be happy that you did. Still, though, I think this was a fairly popular album. Maybe it just wasn't what Pixies fans wanted. It was what I definitely loved it, and I don't know. It seems like most people probably had this one, and maybe they had Teenager of the Year, but then jumped off the ship. But anyway, there's a lot of great stuff there, and certainly no exception on this one.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm one of those people who sort of jump ship after Teenage of the Year, but I have gone back from time to time, and I definitely realize I screwed up that across his solo career. I think he has made some duds, but not enough to scare me away. So you're right. Los Angeles is a massively awesome song. Like, it's hard to top that.
Well, yeah,
So,
and yeah, I mean, there's so many great ones on here. You know, I heard Ramona sings great, Czar's great, 10%er, Adelie, you know, like, I don't know, I like Teenager of the Year even more than this one. I like this one quite a bit, and then there's just stuff the rest of the way. I don't know. I'm on board for all of that, I have to say.
yep. All right. You and I don't agree on this. I'm not necessarily trying to put you on the spot. If you want to defend yourself, you certainly may. But I am surprised that Dr. Dre, The Chronic, isn't in your top 10.
Well, one thing. This is a technicality, and I will allow it. But this album was also released in December of '92. But since we are talking December, if you want, you know,
it charted. I don't know. It primarily charted in 1993. It was experienced by most people in 1993.
Yeah,
for sure.
I won't argue that.
Well, that's not the basis upon which you've kept it out. I want to head off any potential. I won't claim that it's end to end all killer, no filler. There is surely some filler on there. However, that is if you compare its dead spots, nothing is so dead that it nullifies the absolutely towering contribution it made to human culture with its peaks. You can't do much better than the singles on The Chronic. Like, I just don't think you can do much better than Dre Day and Nothing But a G Thing in particular. Like, I'm not sure. Yes, they are absolutely, you can't say influenced by previous other music achievements. Like, to some degree, it's like a lift of other people's ideas musically, but the synthesis, nothing really stacks up to all those ingredients being put together quite that well. The singles are so big. There's really not much that happened in that decade to compare with them, let alone the year. Like, it's a hitting the reset button on an entire swath of music, I think, those singles have. So it has to be there. It just has to. Chronic. Even though there is some crap on it.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some crap on it. And I think there's, you know, and that's why it doesn't make it, one. And two, you know, I was a huge fan when I was a kid of NWA. I love Straight Outta Compton. You know, as time went on, I realized, you know, like it goes back to what I said, you know, just a few minutes ago. Ice Cube definitely was the MVP of that band. Dre played an important part, and you know, the music that he created was, or, you know, however you want to term it, such a big part of that. But you know, just comparing those two, you know, I think what Ice Cube went on to do was so much better, and without the lyrics of Ice Cube, I think that's a big part of what was lacking, and I just also don't like how laid back it all was. You know, it was, you know, the Straight Outta Compton stuff was just so much harder edged and interesting to me. Yeah, and I had a hard time getting on board with Dre at this time, you know, and yeah, certainly this was a huge album. It made a lot of fans for him, but it kind of and it wasn't so much that this is where I jump ship or anything like that. I think 100 Miles and Running was, well, the song 100 Miles and Running was great, but the album that came off of was a dud of an album, and this this didn't resurrect it for me.
Look, this again, I was just the same suburban white kid buying this record that as all the other suburban white kids I knew that bought the record. It was where I first heard. I think it's Nothing But a G Thing starts with him just going, yeah, hell yeah, you know what I'm saying. Now, I'm sitting here, this, again, this very L7 young man, a very square young man, but I understood, like, he says the lyric, you know what I'm saying, before he said anything, but I did know what he was saying. It was the first time where that little light bulb went off, like, he said, know what I'm saying before he said anything, but I do know what he's saying. Like, that was the first time the circuit really, and the thing that you're referring to is Laid Back, for me, like, I can't imagine that getting through to me without that. Like, I just, I knew what he was saying the first time I heard it, and I hadn't heard him say anything other than know what I'm saying. It's one of the only records in the world I think good enough to even back that up.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a split decision for sure. And I understand why people like it. It's not that I don't get that, but just, being a fan of Straight Outta Compton, I just this just wasn't where it was at for me.
Was Snoop ever better, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. I'm a moderate fan of Snoop.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, because I don't know, because to me it just didn't have that kind of and I'm again, I understand why. I get what there is to like about Snoop, and I get it, and I appreciate it and respect it. Yeah, but it just overall, like that sort of flow wasn't the kind, like, I wanted a more intense sort of thing, maybe more.
Did you listen to the song that came out, what I think of as being one of Dre's first real solo records, and it was Snoop's debut, was the song Deep Cover from the movie Deep Cover, which I've never seen and hope I never have to. But that song, Deep Cover, is hard as hell. Like, it is a little more NWA-like in that regard. Mm-hmm. Snoop, like, that's one of the reasons I loved those singles so much, is after Deep Cover, I was wondering, like, what the hell is going to be next? Because Deep Cover is a hard record. Another one. I wish it was on the streaming services. It's just not. That is a fantastic record, and then my expectations are like, wow, that guy Snoop's great. The beat's hard as hell, and then they come back with a completely different vibe, and they just I like the George Clinton stuff, I think, as much as anybody else. I understood, like, what it was derivative of, but you can't say that all he did is repackage George Clinton. There's just too much else there. It's such a big deal. It was just like an atom bomb going off. Anyway, I've said my piece.
This is, I think, one of Dre's strengths, though, is that he has taste. He knows where to go for material. You know, and yeah, I mean, that's still a strength. But yeah, it's just it didn't live up to Straight Outta Compton for me, and yeah, it's fine. Everybody loves it. Everybody. What's that?
Nothing lives up to Straight Outta Compton, really. Like, it's a standard that's almost impossible to meet.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I mean, everybody loves this one more than me, and that's fine. That is what it is. All right. So, okay, my number 3. Staying with the former Pixies here. Breeder's Last Splash, I think, was, just a. You could probably take Cannonball by itself. I think one of the biggest, one of the best songs of the decade, but also a great album around it. And I think everything was fire. Great debut by Frank Black. This is a couple of full albums into the Breeders catalog, and the third if you count Safari. And I think Kim Deal was also hitting on all cylinders with this one as well.
Yeah. I think Pixies fans always loved her, and I think Pixies fans were super excited to see her do well. I don't know if I don't really think of her as fomenting any competition with Frank Black, or I don't think of Frank Black as creating any real particular competition for her. But, the first Breeders album was sort of treated like just like a little side project and an anomaly, but it's not. It's a good album. And then the Safari EP is fucking great. And then this is really the sort of first album that was sort of taken seriously as an album, and she hits it out of the park. And I think probably, one of the reasons I think Frank Black fell off a little, or people think of him as falling off, is because she never did. You know what I mean? Like, her stuff stayed consistently high quality. There aren't a ton of dead spots in her solo catalog, and I think there are more in Frank Black. So again, it's not a competition.
Well, but I mean, there's more material. There's more material overall in the Frank Black stuff. He released albums. He's always released albums at a pretty high rate.
Yeah.
So you might have some dead spots, but there's so much more overall. I think their careers are both excellent. And I don't bother with who wins. In that. I mean, basically, I'm just happy that they both put out good stuff. I'm glad to see it.
I'd like to know what the record contracts were, because I get your point and I agree with you, but I think at that time, the person that people thought was most likely to succeed was going to be Mr. Francis.
Well,
and
yeah, he wrote most of the songs in the Pixies by far. Kim Deal's songwriting contributions weren't a lot during the Pixies days. So yeah, you couldn't have really known what to expect from her. But you probably knew.
She pulled an ace for sure.
What's that?
She pulled an ace for sure on this album.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's why it's on my list.
Yeah, that's a good one. I can go really short here, and then my next one up is an album we already talked about, which is the Wu-Tang Clan's debut album, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. If you're hearing about this album today for the first time, like, there's not a lot I can do for you here. So just
like
probably want to put that record on then.
How did you get here if that's the case?
Yeah, like, I don't know. There's nobody listening at this point who needs any convincing on that or on any of the other Wu family records of that general vintage. So instead of talking about that, I just want to do a quick little hit from my honorable mention list. I feel remiss not talking a tiny bit more on the shoegaze tip, because we didn't talk. Neither of us ended up putting Smashing Pumpkins in our main list, but I always thought of Smashing Pumpkins being the most commercial manifestation sort of the original shoegaze aesthetic. Like, I guess they played a little more rockin', but I think a lot of times the first time people were hearing like that kind of sound would have been the Smashing Pumpkins Siamese Dream in 1993. So I don't think that album rates as even like top 20 for the year, but it's important because if you're a shoegaze nerd like me, this was sort of the last real push of good first gen shoegaze stuff. Mazzy Star's Fade Into You, I thought, was a little bit shoegaze adjacent. The Slow Dive album, Souvlaki, came out that year. This is a bit of a hot take if you're a Slow Dive fan, but I liked the first one a little bit better than Souvlaki. But like, Slow Dive is practically a subgenre of their own. And then also that year was Spiritualized put out a great live album called Fucked Up Inside. I have to admit, in the Spacemen 3 divorce, I did go with Sonic Boom. I did go. I did not join the spiritualized fan club so much, but the first 2 spiritualized records, including this one, are fucking great. It's not on Spotify, but if you ever have a chance to get fucked up inside by spiritualized, if you like that great drony stuff, like this is the last time I think spiritualized really sounded like a Spacemen 3 offshoot. After that, they went a different direction, but this is when they were good and drugged out and high as fuck, and that's really what I liked from Spiritualized and Spacemen 3. So look up Fucked Up Inside if you can. But those were my also Rands. Those are my my consolation list. My actual number 3 is Enter the Wu-Tang.
Okay. My number 2 is maybe the one that would be number 1 for a lot of people. I concede. But In Utero by Nirvana, which, I do think this is the best Nirvana album, at least if you're talking about the studio albums, and that was released September 12th of '93. I really like, as far as Nevermind goes, I wish it sounded more like this. I think that they definitely found the right match with Steve Albini in engineering and producing this album. I think that is the true Nirvana sound. It's much too cleaned up on Nevermind, and the songs, of course, are much more personal on this one, and a lot deeper. I think the songs are the best of Kurt Cobain's career, and I think the production is right. It's loud. It's emotional. I definitely, to me, it is probably, it's not the start. It's not the place that most people are going to start with Nirvana. And maybe that's good. Maybe it's a better ending place than a starting place. But it's definitely the best one, I think.
I'm not sure I agree, but it's my number 1 album for the year, so I'll come back, and I have nothing to say other than hoorah, hooray. I'll get back to the Nirvana. Real quick, I'll jump in. My number 2 is Liz Phair. She's had to put up with a lot of shit, and I don't know. I do think those first 2 records of her really are the sort of artistic centerpiece of her career. One of the best accounts on Twitter is Chicago Party Ant. I don't know if you've ever been on the Twitter feed of Chicago Party Ant. I feel like Liz Phair sort of ended up becoming like the alternative version of the Chicago Party Ant on those last records, and I don't know. That's her choice. I don't think those records are as bad as everybody says, but it would just be, I think it's absurd to suggest that anything other than Whip Smart and Exile in Guyville represent sort of her artistic peak. And I think you're going to have a very hard time finding an end-to-end better album than Exile in Guyville in the entire decade. Unfortunately, she made her debut while Nirvana was sort of at their artistic peak, and to be a female alternative artist or indie artist at that time probably came with a little extra layer of bullshit. I don't know if Male Model by Slater Kinney is that explicitly about Kurt Cobain, or am I inferring too much?
I don't know anything about that. I haven't heard that.
Okay, so like I feel like the women who were participating in the alternative music scene at that time, grunge had a lot of testosterone on it, and I feel like Liz Phair kind of paid a price for that, and she shouldn't have, because this is actually a great little indie record. It's not a grunge record, and it shouldn't have had to compete with that. It's a duet. It's a guitar and a drum.
I think she did fine, really. I don't know. I think there are a few things that went against her, but I don't think it was necessarily that she was competing with grunge. I think in her audience was a bit than that. She wasn't necessarily, if you're talking about maybe going more mainstream, yeah, sure, everybody was competing against grunge, but for her, I think the things that she had going against her at the time was she wasn't a very strong vocalist, and she was definitely not she was not a polished live performer whatsoever.
Yeah.
So like, she had songs, and usually that's not going to be a very strong selling point. I think it was wise of her to possibly concoct a story, about the album being an answer to Exile in Guyville, a song by song answer to it, because that was a good marketing tool. But yeah, I think really her audience wasn't really going to be the mainstream audience. Eventually, she did go for that, though, because I think
but people crucify her to this day for that, and I think it's kind of unfair. And remember when this album was out, I think Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill had been within like a year of that, right? That album, Jagged Little Pill, I know is very important for women of my generation. I didn't really identify with it. And again, one of the things I think that's great about post-punk music in particular is that it started to be represent real opportunities for female musicians to be real artists and real musicians, and not just sort of like just pop music. You know what I mean? Like, and I felt,
if you're going to make that comparison, I would say, you might look at like You Ought to Know as an angry version of a Liz Phair song, perhaps. But the anger is the selling point there. I mean, Liz Phair songs aren't angry. But
they kind of are, though. You're right. Angry is not a word that I would think of first to describe her, but like the ideas of feminism as we think of them now were only really just starting to form in the public conscience then. And the way that a confessional female record, Alanis Morissette really is, while I don't enjoy that album very much, that's an incredibly brave album to make, and to just go out there in the world like that and just be who you are. It's a really brave statement, but and I just don't relate to it necessarily. But I felt like Exile in Guyville is equally as brave, and I did relate to it. Like it's definitely the female voice, I think, is one of the most important features of it. But I think one of the things that we talk about her, like the universal quality of her songwriting, is it creates empathy for things that I don't think I otherwise would have thought to empathize with. Like there is a universal human element to it, which is, I think, what makes it great. Like there wasn't it had to be hard for her to get this album made, and she had to have persisted. You know what I mean? Like, and she had to have really done the hard work. And I just think it's one of the most brave records I've ever heard, in addition to being all the other great stuff we say about it.
Well, I think there are universal things definitely on it. I think Fucking Run, and I don't think it's just, I don't think it's just a female thing either. I think, Fucking Run is something a lot of people have felt that, and it expresses what a lot of people have felt. And I think, it's not, it goes beyond gender. It I think applies to many people of both genders.
I don't know. I feel like she put up, I think for her being frank about her sexual life, or being open about her sexual life, she paid for that. And, and she, I don't know, some of the lyrics that people focused on at the time, and I think overdid, were the more sexualized aspect of it. And I think that's her bare chest in the liner notes, their art, or whether it is or isn't. Like, I think people put her up, accused her of being a little more lewd than she was. She was being open, you know what I mean? And it was just really, I can't think of it. I don't think of that whole comparison with the Rolling Stones makes no sense. The Rolling Stones don't have anything. They put in a concept, but it ain't conventional.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think it was probably wise, but yeah, I don't.
What horseshit! It drives me nuts because I don't hear even an artistic comparison. Maybe the rawness of it a little bit, but this is a
Well,
duet. It's I
what
don't
she
think.
had what she had said is that the songs on the album were answers to what Mick was saying on XL and on Main Street.
All right, maybe
And
whatever.
I think maybe in a couple of cases it was, but I think she sold that idea, and I think it sold well. I feel like the reception was pretty warm to it. I don't really remember. I don't remember many dissenting voices on that one.
Yeah, but the fame eluded her. Like mainstream success eluded her, and that's what I mean. That I think one of the collections of that time she put out was called like Juvenalia, I think, which I always looked at as sort of like a slap at her early career. You know what I mean? Like I felt like even in her own career arc, I think she had a phase where she wasn't super comfortable with these records, and I always felt that there's the sociological importance of them it's important, and I'm glad we talk about it, but it does sometimes overshadow just the joy of the music making and the beauty of the songwriting. And if she was just allowed to make her own record without all the sociological baggage, I think it would be more widely appreciated. And I also think she might have made it as a mainstream star. I don't know. I feel like people punished her for the frankness of these albums, and I think the frankness is what makes them so great and why they still mean so much. That's my reading.
Well, I think that's the reason why people bought them. That the people that bought them, I think they bought them for that reason. I think that's the reason why people connected with it. I think it's the reason why we're talking about them now. So you might wonder why it wasn't more successful mainstream, and well, maybe it was ahead of its time. I don't know, but but we're still talking about it. So,
but do you? I follow her on Twitter. She's a good Twitter follow. But I don't know. I think she's not talked about with the same reverence as like as some of the riot girls of that time. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
like I don't.
She was doing her own. She was doing her own thing. She didn't sound like really anybody else so much.
Right, but I don't know. I feel like that was a time where females could, particularly on the indie labels, they were allowed to be their own, given like basic creative control over the entire thing. Like the indie product really had like female creative control for the first time, and I've always thought of Liz Phair as being one of the best examples of that. And I don't know if people think of her that way, and I wish give it another listen. That what she just put out the 25th anniversary of that album a couple years ago, or whatever the big anniversary was. That box set sold out in like 2 weeks. I didn't get it, and it's like $300 now if you want a used copy. So somebody out there, I hope it's not all just old dudes like me out trying to buy that thing. I hope the reason it's competitive is because some of the kids are picking up on it. I hope so. All right, I'll be an optimist.
All right, so my number one is Uncle Tupelo's Anodyne. I love Uncle Tupelo. Love Jay Farrar. Love Jeff Tweedy. Love Wilco now. And this was an album where I think both of them were coming into their own. I think in most of the time of Uncle Tupelo, Jay Farrar was overshadowing Jeff Tweedy. And I think it was later on that Tweedy came into his own really, or really where he peaked. He peaked later. He peaked really around I would say between Summer Teeth and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. But he was coming into his own here, and both of them were really. It's the album. I love all of the Uncle Tupelo albums quite a bit. I think this one maybe does have a bit of an edge because I think they're both just so strong at that point. And Jeff's New Madrid is still my favorite song that he ever wrote. And probably my favorite Uncle Tupelo song, and even though Jay Farrar was so good as well, and it's one of my favorite all-time albums. It to me was definitely the most important album of that year, and maybe the most important album of the '90s to me, really. But an album I absolutely love, and definitely deserving of being my number one.
Wow, we might actually agree. I agree with you more than you might think. You're an Uncle Tupelo super fan, and in the Uncle Tupelo divorce, I went with Jay Farrar, which I know makes me just a weirdo.
Well, the first out of the gate, the Sunvolt album was great, and it probably looked like he was going to have the superior solo career.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think, and I think the thing about Wilco is Jay Bennett played a big part in a lot of the peak era of Wilco as well. So it wasn't just that it was Jay Farrar versus Jeff Tweedy. You had other collaborators in there as well. But I think they've both done great things with their careers post Uncle Tupelo. But I'd probably give the edge post Uncle Tupelo to Jeff.
Yeah, I've loved. You can't argue about either of them. They're both masters. But I think I love Drown. I think Drown is probably my favorite post Uncle Tupelo song. For either of them. But you're right. New Madrid is slept on. I don't think people. I agree with you. That is certainly why this album has to be rated high. But it is probably Jeff Tweedy's best contribution to them for sure, right?
Yeah. He was really coming into his own, and I mean, even going beyond that, New Madrid is probably a top 10 song for me of all time, really. Like it is a song that and it also happens to be anytime I get out a guitar, it is also the first song that I play because it and I never get sick of playing it either. But yeah, it's just a fantastic song.
Uncle Tupelo would be in my my bands that I wish would get back together and make a real album together. I know they can't or wouldn't, but they're all alive and they all still have it. They've all still got the gift.
It could happen.
Yeah, I hope so. Hope it does. All right, my last album is one we've talked about already. My number one is In Utero by Nirvana. One of my favorite things. I love the story arcs when bands have expectations on them and they not only meet the expectations, they just like shatter them and make it so that it's like the Beatles are one of the few bands who did that, where they would people had expectations they would do one thing and then they would come back with something else so much better than anybody expected that nobody expected anything of them anymore. They finally got the freedom and the trust of everybody that wherever you're going, we'll go with you. This is one of the things about In Utero that makes me most sad, is that I think this album gave them that. I think at that point, it wasn't about loving that one album anymore. I think lots of square people like myself were ready pretty much to go wherever he was going to go. And of course, I think his repulsion at the thought of having to do that and play the tour guide for folks like myself, I'm sure probably nauseated him. So either way, to me, the album for them to pull an ace after Nevermind and do exactly what you said, which is it really does. It does tie them back to Bleach a bit. It does take them back to. It does make a very clear restatement of who they are and what they were about, and it gave them flexibility to go either direction after that.
I don't see it as a restatement. I see it as a step forward, really, because the songs I think are a lot stronger than Bleach, and by the way, it wasn't an album that the record company was happy about. They weren't thrilled with the way it was done. And they definitely wanted to remix it and things like that. But
well, they were corporate rock, whatever unit shifters or corporate rock whores. But I think if you go back and listen to that album now, like they basically earned that magical, get out of expectations free card that almost nobody else earns by making such a great album. You mentioned the thing with the record company. I have to say, I don't know which order they came out, but as much credit as Steve Albini deserves, and we want to be positive, and I think Steve Albini is one of the most important people in music, that was a fairly controversial time for him because he was given the first or second PJ Harvey album to do. The first album, I think, is called Dry. That was a really good, had some really, really, really good stuff, and I think it was obvious to everybody that, like, PJ Harvey is going to be the next big thing. And then, her album comes out, I think it's Rid of Me, and 50 Foot Queenie's great, and there's good stuff on there, but, like, very quickly after that album came out, they were sort of shamed into putting out the demos so that people could have heard what that album would have sounded like without the heavy hand of Steve Albini on it. Now, Steve Albini is a master, and if he thinks that record sounds better the way it turned out, I respect his decision. I do like the demos as well. I'll leave it at that. It's not a sure thing that an Albini record with Nirvana was going to turn out this good. He really did do a masterwork here himself. His shit, I don't think everything he does is great, but when he's great, he's top of the line.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was being heavy-handed here. He was giving them what they wanted. I think this was the sound that they wanted. Of course, Nevermind was huge, but I think they wanted something that sounded rougher. They wanted something that sounded more like In Utero definitely has more of the feel of the way that Nirvana sounded live than what Nevermind did.
Well, I feel like there's a little synchronicity between Kurt Cobain and John Lennon. One of the little synchronicities I noted is that towards the end of their band life, they started doing more blues, and they had this little era where they were able to really channel energy on blues records that adds like an incredible amount of depth to my enjoyment of them. And I would say, if you doubt Kurt Cobain, like everybody knows his cover of the Leadbelly song on the Unplugged record, but if you doubt the bluesiness of All Apologies, find Herbie Hancock's cover of it, and just hear it the way Herbie Hancock hears it. Like, really, Kurt Cobain's power at that point, like his command of the different languages in rock, and like the fact that he could fuse even like that blues energy to the punk energy, the way that he did is, I think, why this album is just, it's great on its own. And if Nevermind hadn't existed, like, I think they may not have been as popular, but I think we'd still be talking about this record as the best record of the year. I really think that it is that good.
So doing a little fact checking on that. So the PJ Harvey album was recorded in December of '92, and In Utero was recorded in February of '93.
Okay.
Both recorded at the same studio, by the way, Pachyderm Studios in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. Cannon Falls is between Rochester and Minneapolis. And in the case of In Utero, a big part of the reason why Albini wanted to record there is because Cannon Falls isn't really that close to. It's not far from Minneapolis, but it wasn't close enough that, that Kurt, like, he wanted to make sure that Kurt Cobain stayed clean while doing it as much as possible, and so it's kind of being remote in order to achieve that.
Yeah, in January in Minnesota, that would be. As Prince said, it keeps the bad people out, or many of them.
Well, February in Minnesota, but yes.
Yeah.
Late February.
I feel like the Rid of Me was controversial, and I don't know if Steve Albini mastered that album or not. I don't know.
By the way, an interesting note about In Utero was that it was recorded, well, I guess it was recorded in 14 days. So at first I was looking at that and wasn't doing the math right in my head, but 14 days was recorded.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't. I think probably my greatest regret of the concert I didn't go to was the that tour, the In Utero tour, when they came to. I think they played the Mark of the Quad Cities in Davenport, and my friend went, and I didn't.
Yeah, that was a regret for me too, especially because so they played St. Paul, and the Breeders opened for them, and so I wanted to see both bands, but didn't end up going. So it would have been great, just not enough that it's a regret and eventually I did see the Breeders, so that's fine. But never got to see Nirvana, and could have seen them with the Breeders opening up. It would have been pretty great.
Ooh, that sucks. Yeah. Well, yeah, not having having them come through to Iowa and then not seeing them. That although I was an overnight disc jockey at the oldie station, I couldn't go to concerts anymore because I was pulling the night shift. Who's going to play Tommy James and the Shondells at 3 a.m. if I don't? I sacrificed my Nirvana concert access for Gene Pitney. Take that, Gene Pitney, wherever you are.
Now the answer to that question would be it'd just be automated anyway.
That is so true. That is so true. All right, we've made it. We got we ranked them, and we didn't. Well, I'm sorry, actually, we didn't rank them, but we kind of ended up ranking them.
Kind of. It's a loose ranking. So
Nirvana, I'll stand by.
Yeah. So so now we got to figure out what year we're going to do the next time that we do this. It isn't to say that we're going to do another one of these next week. We're not. But just so we know where we're going the next time we do this, we're going to hit the button and see where the time machine goes next.
Hit it.
Drum roll, I guess, or whatever. Okay, we are going to 1980 next.
That's good. That was a good year. That was a very good.
Yeah, 1980 is the next destination in the time machine. We're doing this for years in the album era, which I think have figured out is basically starts in 65. I think.
Yeah.
We might revise that depending on
Rubber Soul sort of begins our concept of the album era.
Right. That was basically what I determined. So so tentatively that's what our parameters are. And next will be 1980.
Wow, that's going to be a very, very interesting year. I think that's right in the sweet spot of when alt music was at its best. So yes, I look forward to this. I'm excited. Very excited. Have we picked a topic for next week? I know we have. We've been kicking a few around.
Well, yeah, we'll have to kick around a few more, or we'll keep kicking them around for a little bit, and then we'll.
All right. Don't forget though, Pixies family tree. Can't be Pixies, but it can be somebody in a Pixies side project, or their projects.
Somebody who used to wear a Pixies uniform.
No, somebody who has shared battle with someone in a Pixies. So we should be able to do Belly and Throwing Muses in that same.
Oh, okay.
It's 6 degrees of the Pixies. How about that?
That might be too many degrees. That might get a little bit dicey.
All right. Well, we'll figure it out. It's just an excuse to talk about Throwing Muses. I think that's a pretty respectable request.
Yeah, we'll hammer that one out. We've got a lot to hammer out.
All right. Well, it may not be next week, but I promise we'll bring something. We'll bring something great when we see you on the next episode.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.